Dr. Kevin Stillwagon was licensed as a chiropractor in Florida and Pennsylvania in 1980. He self-published a book in 1984 on medical freedom and the dangers of vaccines. He's invented and patented a thermographic device in 1985 and taught its use worldwide. He became an airline pilot in 1987 and was forced to retire in 2020 because he refused to wear a face mask. He began to speak out against mandatory masks and vaccines at school boards, county commissioner meetings, and freedom rallies. And he joins me right now. Sir, again, thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for joining me, and thank you for your courage in standing up to COVID tyranny, sir.
Well, it's nothing new to me. I've done it in the past, and I will continue to do so. I just will not tolerate loss of medical freedom and people being forced to put something into their body against their God-given inalienable right to free will. That is intolerable, and I'll do anything I can to stop it.
You know, and don't you wish, sir, that that we weren't so grossly outnumbered in that they've just brainwashed an entire population. Sometimes it feels like we're wandering around in the zombie apocalypse almost. The number of people that they have, but here's the beautiful side of it, is that a lot of people are coming awake. I'm understanding that like 1% of the population will ever inject themselves with the mRNA.
Right.
That's
yeah, people
thing.
Are starting to see the signs that, an injection of mRNA is particularly the man-made messenger RNA is extremely dangerous. And we're seeing all of the warning signs now and people that are having severe adverse reactions. And people are waking up. So it's all a matter of education and, spreading the truth around. And that'll wake enough people up that we won't be fooled the next time. And believe me, they're going to try the same playbook over and over and over again. They're going to try to find some supposedly deadly pathogen, disease X, whatever they want to call it. And they'll say, if you come in contact with this thing, it will kill you. And the only way out of this problem is to inject yourself with something called a vaccine to create antibodies. And that's just a false narrative. Plain, pure, and simple, anything that you inject into your body to create an antibody cannot prevent an infection, nor can it stop the spread of that infection. It just can't do it. It's there to react to the infection. That's all it can do. And unfortunately, the antibodies that are created by these shots called vaccines, particularly using the mRNA platform, these are suboptimal antibodies, and they end up doing more harm than good. And we can get into the biology on that. But I think what we probably need to focus on today is aviation safety. The last time you had me on, Pete, we were on with the FAA whistleblower.
Oh, that's right.
Greg.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You look taller this time around. I'm just kidding. No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
We got a couple more whistleblowers now, and unfortunately, one of them's dead. He was a Boeing whistleblower, John Barnett. There's another one.
Did you know him?
Still alive. I did not know. I never met the man, but I appreciate his courage in coming forward and raising some concerns on problems that were going on, particularly on the assembly line itself at the manufacturing facility there. And now we have another whistleblower, Ed Pearson. He's still alive, and he's also voicing similar concerns with the production of the Boeing 737 MAX Series 8 and 9. Yeah, so something's going on here.
Dr. Stillwagon, since the last that we spoke, we have a lot more information. Okay, do we not? Do you find that pilots are, there was a lot of uncertainty. I mean, they wanted to protect their careers, of course, and they sacrificed a lot by some of them actually taking the vaccine. But now there's a lot more information as to the seriousness of the injuries to the pilots. What can you give us an update in that regard?
Yeah, so it was known even before the shot rolled out that it could cause myocarditis, which is an inflammation of the heart muscle itself, endocarditis, which is the inflammation of the inside lining of the heart, and pericarditis, which is inflammation of the sac that surrounds the heart. All three of these conditions are extremely dangerous for a pilot to experience because it can result in sudden cardiac death. In fact, if a pilot is diagnosed with any of those three things, they are immediately grounded. They can't even be issued a license or a medical certificate, which is required to fly an aircraft of any type, even a small Cessna, because, again, of the possibility of a sudden cardiac failure. And so, yeah, that was known before the shot even rolled out. So why the FAA would allow such a product to be injected into pilots needs to be thoroughly investigated. I'm calling for an aviation safety subcommittee hearing, and we need to get the FAA administrators, the people who made the decision to allow this product to go into pilots and flight crews. We need to determine why they made that decision so that this never happens again. They went directly against their internal guidance, Pete. We all know this now. You cannot put an experimental product into pilots. Even if a drug reaches FDA approval, you still have to wait a full year before pilots and flight crews are allowed to take it. And the reason is because even though there are, supposedly safety and efficacy studies that are done on a drug or a shot called a vaccine, you still have to wait for the post-marketing experience to see what the reactions are in the general public outside of the testing program, because there could be possibly some adverse reactions that show up that would affect safety of flight. Well, going into this shot, again, we knew ahead of time that it could create problems like myocarditis. So why they allowed this shot to go into pilots, we need to figure out why that happened. My suspicion is that it could have been one of two things. Either it was a political pressure thing because the FAA, of course, is a government entity, and if the edict comes down from the Biden administration that we're going to mandate this thing, the FAA just runs the flag up the pole and says, okay, we're going to go with this, and they didn't bother doing their own investigation or testing, which they admit that they don't do. They're relying on the testing that was, supposedly done, and they're trusting that testing was accurate. We now know that it wasn't. So another reason it could be is because of fear. They fell for the narrative. They fell for the lie that this was a deadly pathogen, and if you came in contact with it, it was going to kill you. And, anybody that was paying attention should have clearly seen that in February of 2020, the Diamond Princess cruise ship was quarantined off the coast of Japan. Everybody on that ship was tested and tracked. The only people that died were elderly and comorbid. And pilots are not elderly and comorbid. So then they changed the narrative, you see, to, well, we should just inject everybody because it will protect people from becoming infected and stop the spread. And that was an absolute lie, as I've already touched on. These shots were not designed to do that. Fauci knew it. Birx knew it. They even admitted it. And, anybody at the FAA that was a doctor worth their salt should have known that also. So this thing should have never, ever gone into pilots. So, yeah, we need to take some serious looks at this and make sure that this kind of thing never, ever happens again.
Who are the advocates, as far as that are we're getting some good movement on it as far as getting the FAA to act internally, in Congress, that is?
Well, you mean to investigate this?
Yeah.
Well, I made an effort to do some testimony in Marjorie Taylor Greene's office, and this was back in January of this year. That was the day that Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Ryan Cole, and Dr. Kurt Milhelm from Hawaii had testified on the dangers of this shot. And I was actually scheduled to speak that day, specifically concerning how this shot has affected aviation safety. But they ran out of time. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's office assured me that they would try to set up a hearing in the future to address these issues of aviation safety. So we'll see where that goes.
Okay. How long ago was that when you were in their office?
That was in January of this year, January the 12th.
Yeah. Okay. Congressman Wenstrup, have you got any action? Now, he's got the COVID committee he's digging in. Have you spoken to his investigative committees?
We have spoken to several through the actions of usfreedomflyers.org, which I am now the vice president of. We have reached out to several congressmen's offices and talked to their assistants and aides. And, we are gaining some traction there. We're getting some movement going. But until we have an official hearing, I don't think anything's going to happen, Pete, really.
No, I agree, and it's just sad that they'll kill us lickety split, but investigating the murders of hundreds of thousands of people, which is essentially what it is, hundreds of thousands of people as a result of taking the jab. We got to slow walk that.
Yeah, the latest estimate that I saw was 550,000 excess deaths from this shot.
Crazy.
So
yeah. And that was delivered Operation Warp Speed, but we investigated it. It's Operation Slow Speed. And unfortunately, also, I'm going to say this, and you can keep arm's length from this because I want you to have a good relationship with the greatest weapon in the weaponization of government, Congress. I digress. Congressman Wenstrup had hundreds of thousands of dollars donated to his political campaign from Big Pharma. I'm sure he's going to be slow walking the truth. Either that or at least return the money. I've already demanded that he do that because it's a conflict of interest. He's working for Big Pharma, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, who was the comedian that said that all of our congressmen should be wearing NASCAR uniforms so that you can see who owns them? Because this is all money. It's all money driven. All of
Absolutely. Which also reminds me, that when we were originally taken down from social media because we were talking about hydroxychloroquine, I was like, oh my goodness, it was, we were some sort of fringe radicals that were offering some snake oil concoction, when in fact we find out now that they could not admit that there was an alternative to what they authorized under emergency use authorization. Horrifying right. That they did that.
Yeah, because, anything that was proposed as a solution that had merit would preempt the emergency use authorization program, which this shot was rolled out under. So that all happened for a reason.
Yes. Now, U.S. Freedom Flyers, by the way, I think you already know how much of an advocate I am for the pilots to come together to have a voice, really, where it's very difficult for them to stand up on their own. They'll be taken out and retaliated against.
Right.
So, U.S. Freedom Flyers, you're now the vice president of U.S. Freedom Flyers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I didn't know that.
I stand behind their goals and their objectives.
Outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Yeah. Okay. Sure. the incidents that are taking place. I want to review these because you may not be a pilot, but you're listening right now, and there's planes flying overhead, and there have been incidents. We hear about the Boeing airplanes. We've got some safety issues there. Can you tell me about the number? Are they tracking the number of occurrences where somebody has potential heart issues? What kind of incidents have we heard about recently that's related potentially to the jab?
Yeah, so this is a problem that we need to deal with. The FAA does keep a database, and it's very well hidden. It's at the Civil Aerospace Medical Institute, and this is part of the FAA, and it's called the Incapacitation Data Registry, and they do keep official records of pilot incapacitations that happen over the years. I'm not allowed to see that. I asked for it. So I put in a FOIA request to get the raw database. And I did this about a month ago, and I'm still waiting to get that database. So there will be some very telling information in there. Unfortunately, the only way that we can get pilot incapacitation data now is when it hits a news network or a local newspaper, or somebody mentions on social media that, the pilot was incapacitated and had to be hauled off the airplane, or we saw a pilot pass out and hit the floor. And this happened a couple of times. It's been caught on camera. The last one that I saw was in Virginia, at the Richmond International Airport, I believe it was, and where the pilot, it was a Delta pilot, on his way to work in uniform and collapsed of a cardiac arrest. And luckily the TSA was nearby and they were able to shock him back into life. But unfortunately, we've had pilots pass away on layovers. And all of these incidents need to be investigated. The way it stands right now, Pete, the National Transportation Safety Board that investigates incidents like this, they don't have to investigate unless there's either damage to the aircraft or passengers get injured for some reason. And so this could be, something that occurred during a flight, like maybe a severe turbulence encounter that would incapacitate a pilot for some reason, and passengers got hurt. So those are the ones that are investigated. But if a pilot just loses consciousness on the flight deck, and the other pilot takes over and lands the aircraft normally, that is not required to be investigated by the NTSB, but it should be. In fact, that's one of the changes that we're going to try to implement, for a little more government oversight here, that we need to start investigating those incidents. And the reason is because, we know that the protein that's created by this mRNA injection, the foreign protein that's floating around in your blood, can definitely cause problems that will incapacitate a pilot. And these include subtle problems like brain fog or a transient ischemic attack, or major problems like a cardiac event where the pilot loses consciousness, or even worse, a seizure, Pete. And I think I really need to drill this home. I believe that a seizure in a pilot is going to be the thing that's going to cause, a severe incident like a crash. Because pilots are trained all of the time for an incapacitation of the other pilot. And it does happen. I mean, it happened pre-COVID, of course. So, we're trained for that. And either pilot can safely land that aircraft and get it to the gate from either seat. But if there's an uncommanded, unexpected, full flight control input from a seizure, and I'm talking about a major catatonic seizure where the body goes completely rigid and stiff instantly. And this happens with a lot of force, Pete. There was an incident that was recorded in the 1990s, and it's in the database that I talked about. Somebody did an investigation of that database back in the 1990s, and they described an incident where a 49-year-old pilot landing an aircraft, and this was a large aircraft, had a seizure that caused one of their legs to go completely stiff. It put in a full rudder input and caused the aircraft to leave the runway and come to an immediate stop. Luckily, it didn't hit any other aircraft. But this control input happened with such force that it caused a fracture, a shoulder fracture in that pilot and a lumbar compression fracture. So what I'm saying here, Pete, is that if that kind of an input happens on rudder pedals, and rudder pedals are connected together on all aircraft, when the captain's pedals move, the first officers move as well, and vice versa. So if either one of those pedals gets fully deflected at a bad time, and that leg is locked, and it's locked straight, rigid, and you can't get it off the rudder pedal because the seat is locked also, we're going to have a serious problem, because you will not be able to overcome that flight control input with another flight control. And this happened to U.S. Air. I could talk about that.
I'm going to ask you just a succession, a couple of questions, and answer it as briefly as you can. And I know the answer to it, and the audience will as well. But what if, for instance, a particular manufacturer's airframe, for instance, has a problem? Let's say there's a problem with a wing, and it's a recurring issue, and it gets investigated. There's full public disclosure. They know every single rivet. They know every single stress test. They know every single maintenance log signed off on. The meticulous nature by which an airframe is inspected is very well documented, correct?
Yeah, all of these things are very, very well documented.
Okay, here's the next thing. Now, hold on one second. You ready? An engine. Every single... I mean, there's safety wire to maintain torque specifications, to hold nuts and bolts. A lot of people don't know this. You torque a screw down, and there's safety wire to hold it in place once you maintain a certain level of torque. But every single nut and bolt on an engine, very, very precise maintenance records, all that stuff, very well documented. So if there's a problem, that's documented as well, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
And these are all entered into the logbook, and this all goes into the safety management system, which is a huge database that the FAA tracks. And if there's a safety signal, then it's looked into. And sometimes they do what's called an airworthiness directive. It requires aircraft to have, inspections immediately. Sometimes the fleet is grounded. Yeah, these things happen.
So you got the engine, you got the airframe, then the avionics, there's system redundancy. If there's any issues with avionics, those are identified, reported. There's inspections that are also associated with that as well, correct?
That's all true.
See, if there's a failure in the cockpit by the individual who's flying it, you're not allowed to get a FOIA request responded to, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I did get a FOIA request in to get that data, but I haven't gotten a response yet. That was about a month ago. Sometimes it takes more than a month to get a response, but we'll see where this goes. And I will definitely be back on your show and give you a full report on what's in there. Because just based on historical data from the last time that database was looked at in the 1990s, which I already alluded to, we can expect about 10 incapacitations in the cockpit a year, about 4 cardiac events, and about 1 cockpit death every 4 years. That's what we could expect. And just based on, pilot incapacitations that have been reported in Dr. William Mackis's Substack called COVID Intel, we're way above that. In fact, in August of 2023, we had 3 pilots die at work in uniform from cardiac events. Yeah. We've got a problem here.
We do.
I'm saying that it's the shot. And until proven otherwise, that's what it is. That's my opinion.
And still no changes to the regular physical checks, because pilots have to undergo an annual physical, correct? Is there any change as to the frequency of their medical condition?
There's been no major changes there. Pilots that are captains and carry what's called a first-class medical certificate have to have a physical every 6 months. And once a year, once you're over the age of 35, I believe it is, you also have to have an EKG. But the problem with these EKGs, Pete, is that they're done at rest. It's not an EKG that's done under stress, like on a treadmill. Mm-hmm. And they probably should be, because that's where you're going to pick up abnormalities.
You know,
there's also other easy tests that could be done to determine if there's some adverse reactions going on from the shot, and these are definitely not being done. Not being done.
I've publicly advocated for, since day one, when he came on my show when we were talking about hydroxychloroquine, and as I told you, Dr. Peter McCullough him and Dr. Yvette Lozano, they're the reasons why we proudly had our YouTube channel whacked, because we weren't within WHO, information standards. But Dr. Peter McCullough, have you been consulting with him as well? He's the foremost, most published cardiologist in the world, and it's been on our side to disclose the truth as to the side effects. Is he working with U.S. Freedom Flyers?
Well, I'm in contact with Dr. Peter McCullough quite a bit. Mm-hmm. He's an extremely busy man, as you know, mm-hmm. and we do collaborate together.
Good.
I have even spoken on the same stage with Peter McCullough several times. Mm-hmm. So I consider him to be a close friend of mine. I can pick up the phone and call him and ask him a question anytime I want to. Yeah, so he's definitely an advocate for freedom of choice, and also how this has affected aviation safety, for sure.
Outstanding. Dr. Stillwagon, I want to bring you on when that FOIA request is responded to. I really, really want to make this, because everybody just overemphasize this point. Everybody has a dog in this fight. I keep saying it over and over again. Every person, not just, even if you don't fly, well, there's thousands of aircraft in the air at any given moment, and they're within our communities on approach. So we have a dog in this fight. We have every reason to want, aviation safety standards to be upheld, and as they always have been, probably the best in the world, right?
Exactly. And aviation is still inherently safe, even with all of the incidents that have happened recently, with a wheel falling off of an aircraft and a panel blowing out on an aircraft. It hasn't caused loss of life. But what we're trying to do at U.S. Freedom Flyers is get the FAA to take some action that's preventive. Most of major changes that happen at the FAA are reactionary to a major disaster. We don't want to see that happen. We want some action taken now to prevent a possible disaster.
Which is,
again, I want to stress that this is my opinion, that if it happens, it's going to be an unexpected full flight control input from a pilot that has a seizure, and the other pilot is not going to be able to overcome that, even by putting in an opposite flight control input. It's not going to do anything. I can give you an example of this. It happened at the Pittsburgh International Airport, U.S. Air Flight 427. This happened on September the 8th, 1994. On final approach, a full rudder input occurred, probably due to an elevator servo hydraulic failure, but they still don't know for sure. It might have been a pilot inputting a full rudder input. Regardless, it was a full rudder input, and both pilots And it was not an incapacitation, because you can clearly hear both pilots screaming on the cockpit voice recorder that was recovered after the crash. They were putting in opposite flight controls on the aileron, and it was unable to stop the aircraft from rolling. And it did roll upside down, and it spun into the ground. It was the most horrific crash that had ever occurred in aviation history. And it was the first time that the National Transportation Safety Board was required to use their hazmat suits to investigate, because it just the devastation and the was just horrific. So yeah, we don't ever want to see this happen.
Certainly not, sir. And this is the reason why we have full public disclosures and open conversations like this to inform the public. And we appreciate your advocacy, the work you do, and your frankness in calling out, the need for, comprehensive investigations and oversight. So, sir, I thank you very much. Tell everybody how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so my email address is just my name, Kevin Stillwagon, at cs.com. That's like CompuServe. I have one of those old CompuServe accounts that I just never got rid of. And I also write a Substack that's available. I do not charge for people to read that Substack. It's totally free. It's drkevinstillwagon.substack.com. That's just drkevinstillwagon.substack.com. And I've also put several videos on Rumble. So if you just go to rumble.com /Kevin Stillwagon, I've got dozens of informational videos on there talking about how the immune system actually works, where the protection of infection actually resides. I do all of these videos in layman's terms. They're easy to understand, but they're very, very educational. Awesome. So yeah, all of that information is there for people to take a look at. And
we will provide all those links below this interview. We'll put out separately as well. Dr. Stillwagon, thank you very much for coming on. We look forward to having you back on once again after we hear back on that FOIA request. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you.